Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Indica Books Writers Workshop with Otis. As you know, we do this every Sunday or as often as we can based on how many writing pieces we get, and that's what we ask of you to send in your writing pieces, preferably about 800 words in length, and you can choose whatever theme topic it is that you are writing or writing from to send that you want to get feedback on, and that's what we do here. Otis will send us feedback before the session, and during the session we all get a chance to take a look at and understand and ask questions and so on. So if you want more details, you can head over to the Indica website, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Indica Books. We have a Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Indic Book Club. And with this, I will turn this over to you, Otis. By the way, we also have a video recording of all our sessions available on the YouTube Indica channel. So over to you, Otis.
Okay, thank you. Is Vandana here? I don't see who's on the attendees.
Oh, so Sri Charan, Arun, Sunil Kumar are there as panelists, yeah, and Anjan Nandi is there as an attendee.
Okay. I just had Vandana sent me her piece again.
And she's going to be joining in.
Is there a new look, Andrew?
Mine?
Yeah.
This thing? Yes, thank you for noticing. I get to a point with the thing of critical mass, and then usually it starts with me shaving, which I haven't done in maybe a month. But I have these, shears, like dog shears, and then I start shaving, and I'm just like, oh, get rid of it all. That's my I go through this cycle. And then I do this, and then I don't do anything for 4 months, and then I do that. It's or maybe it's on the
good problems to have that follically challenged folks like myself don't wish we had that problem.
Yeah, it's true that it's still around. Yeah. It's a problem because Zandi, my partner, she likes it when the more wild it gets, the more sort of Einstein-like it becomes. That's how she likes it. But it drives me crazy, basically. Well, if Vandana's not here, let's see. That makes me reevaluate a little bit. I just have to look at this. This emotional world. Just get my mind around this. Okay, let's Sunil, let's talk about your piece.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. I had a nice day yesterday. It was a big day. I mountain biked, so I mountain biked, and then I've been doing yoga actually pretty consistently for the last, sometime coming out of COVID. So I both mountain biked and I did yoga by 12 o'clock in the morning, which was great. I was like, this is a great way to start the day, except for I wanted the day to be over. I was like, so.
You live in California?
I live in Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah, so just north. There's some nice scenery around here. So Neil, let me share your piece, and share. Let's put us up here, and when you let's have you tell us a little bit about this piece, and I'll have you read a little bit of it too.
Yeah, actually, this is
snippet of a novel I'm writing. So basically, this character, he's not one of the main characters, but he is sort of central to the story. Actually, I'm writing about two alternative worlds. So this world is our universe, so to speak, and the character mentioned in this particular snippet, he lives in Delhi, and he's been sent by a very politically networked lady to, as in, get her land cleared, as in of encroachers. And he is supposed to meet the local political bigwig there. So that sets the context of the passage which has to come. And along the way, he's going from Delhi to Rajasthan, which is like loads of forts, etc. So you've mentioned, I don't get why you've not sure how this fits. Rajasthan was a land of countless legends and unquestionable valor. And the Shiva temple, which I've mentioned, along the way from Delhi to Rajasthan, somebody tells him that close to the Shiva temple, there is a sort of a mysterious portal, vortex, sort of X-Files like, in my imagination. So that is why I've kept the Shiva temple also in that passage.
Okay, we'll probably get to it when we talk, but the reason that I actually point those issues out is not because they're a problem plot-wise, but because the voice that's used, let's see, where is that first one? Oh yeah, when you say Rajasthan was a land of countless legends and unquestionable valor, right? So the reason, so I don't really mark things. I don't know. I don't really have a reason for doing stuff. It's more like I'm reading and stuff jumps out at me. It jumps out at me, and when things jump out at me, I go, "That's a problem," right? Basically, like the way I read, and I think this is what the reader wants, is they want to immerse themselves into a world, and so I also do that. I want to immerse myself in the world, and so I'm in the world. And I'm telling you, I am your best reader. If you do everything correctly and you don't mess with my experience, I will adore you. I will be there. But if I'm reading and then suddenly I'm like, what the hell? And I get, basically, it's sort of, I sometimes talk about how I box. It's sort of like getting it's getting a left hook, right? I'm like, why am I suddenly being thrown out of this story that I'm involving myself in? That's why I mark things. Then I figure out why. Okay, so the first thing that happens is the imaginative experience. I get knocked out of the imaginative experience. Then I go to why is it? So I really want to be clear about that. Actually, it's something I've never said in these Indic workshops, is that I don't have a list of rules and then I apply them. I have my reading and trying to draw myself into your imaginative experience. Then I get knocked out of that, and then I come up with some reasons about why. Okay, so it might be the reason of, oh, it was a reference error or a comma splice, because I recognize those grammatical problems that I'm used to. Or it might be like this one, who's telling me this? So I'm reading along, I'm trying to be with the point of view character, basically, right? And I'm trying to see the world through them, because what I want to do as a reader is I want to basically inhabit the body imaginatively of the point of view character, and then have an experience through that body and come out the other side having been changed and basically advancing in some way, getting to that point that we say, I, as the reader, will never look at the world the same way again. That's what I want, and that's what I'm reading for. So
yeah, if I can interject, I perfectly understood what you said. So that is why, since this is a snippet, I sort of clarified the entire context of what has happened before and what is going to happen, as in I have a vague inkling, as in I have more or less an inkling of how it is going to proceed. And your point is well taken, as in I was listening in the morning only to some American lady who was mentioning exactly the same thing, but in the context of acting. She was saying when boxers hit somebody, they don't aim at the face, they aim at the back of the head. So as readers or actors, you're supposed to drill your way directly into their imagination. So I understood what you said, as in inhabiting the skin of the character. And how would I say alter this? Because in my perception, I am just the narrative is flowing from what, as in linear, from what went on before. And since you've just read the short snippet of the whole thing, so do I need to alter it or make it more like visceral, more show don't tell or something? How do I alter that?
This is it is interesting. I brought up my mountain biking. So I was mountain biking, and I actually met someone going up. We had to go up this hill for an hour and 20 minutes, and I was biking with this guy, and he had more experience than me. And I was talking about some of my difficulties with mountain biking, basically that I get scared. And he said, well, the bicycle can only do one thing at a time. So that's the advice I'm going to give to you. Do one thing at a time. So if you're going to do the narrative voice, do the narrative voice and do it in a block, right? When you do the point of view and you draw us into the story of the character and their body, when you draw us into that person in an environment, a physical person in an environment, do that. So don't do both. Like if you see here, if we look at this paragraph, the town seemed to stare back at him with palpable visceral tension. Okay, so I'm like, I don't know where the heck I am now. Imaginatively, I don't know where I'm located. You want to locate the reader one place, not vague. So like, I don't know if I'm with the town. I don't know so point of view it's a good word to think about, because it's point of view. And I want to emphasize point. Point. That means it's located someplace. Exactly locate the point of view and keep it there. When you move that point of view, and Abhinav and I talk about this continuously, about multiple points of view, make what I will call a hard transition into the other point of view. So now you were in one, you make a hard transition into the next. Use your tools. Our tools are carriage return. Our tools are, words. We have a lot of things. So separate the space, make it a new paragraph, make it a new chapter. Sometimes people do that. They write in one point of view for a chapter, then another point of view. But make separation. So that, but if we continue here, the town seemed to stare back at him. I seem to now be, am I in the town's point of view? Okay. I'm not sure, because it only seemed to stare back at him. So that seems to be his impression. But then we get a hot, dry wind rustled the leaves of banyan trees. I love your details, Sunil. Your details are wonderful. I just want them, I want to know how I'm getting to know them. Does that make sense? Like, what's the conduit that I get? What's the conduit for me? Because the conduit for me is also the conduit that I go through into the world. It's a two-way street, right? So it's a bridge. So I don't know, it would be one thing if our character Amar listened to the banyan, the rustle of the banyan trees leaves. The air as he breathed it in was hot in his nostrils. I'm overdoing it, but to make the point.
Yeah, I understand.
With him, it's his sensory experience.
Yeah.
Right. So
I need to stick to Amar.
Well, he's the only one who can. He's the one that can have sensory experiences, right? Because we know that as human beings, we have sensation. We have sensory experiences of sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. That's our human physical person. So if I'm getting physical sensations, but I have no person, I'm like, what? I don't know how to understand it.
Okay.
And then we get down to the place that we were talking about. The houses were painted in shades of ochre. I love this. I love the details, but I want Amar look down the street, right? So now I put myself, he looked down the street. That's a sensory perception. He smelled the frying, give me some frying food, a food cart is there or something. He smelled the frying, this, that, and the other thing. I've not been to India. Okay. But I am telling you that my imagination of India is that it's a sensory wonderland, right? I'm just telling you, I'm maybe that's some kind of bias or stereotype or something, but I imagine something very colorful. I mean, I know the food of India. I've even cooked it. And it was one of my first cuisines. Okay. I'm not saying I did it well, but I did it. It's incredible. The spices, the smells of things. I mean, unbelievable. This is the environment he's in. Let me experience that. So I love that you do that, but you don't do it through the character. The houses were painted in shades of ochre, sandstone, and terracotta, crumbling walls reflecting the glory of bygone years. When you're giving me sensory experience, I'm going to go back to point of view. I am with you.
Okay.
This is something, I don't say this very much, but I think one of the better effects of storytelling, and I'll say this to all of you, since I know that you have a good familiarity with something like meditation and yoga and things like that. So yoga is very, it tries to draw the mind always into the present, I feel, right? Instead of having ideas of the past or worries about the future, as we have all the time, right? We concentrate on being in the present moment, the breath, right? I think the same is true of really great writing. Really great writing is basically a kind of meditation. It's not without tension, but it's very centered on the moment. And I always notice, remember I told you that I have my feeling first and then I come up with the reason? You will be surprised. I always notice when we jump out of the present and to the past in this case. Past glory, bygone era. You had me with Amar, maybe. You didn't really, but let's say you did better. Right? So I'm with his sensory experience. He's walking down the road. He's smelling things. He's smelling things that are so profoundly dense that he can even taste them on his tongue. There's the sights, the sounds, the honking cars, everything. And I'm right with him. And then suddenly you're talking about the glory of bygone years. Why did you just take me from the story that I've been involved in and then chuck me into the past. Why?
Okay.
Now I'm going to say something that, again, Abhinav and I have talked about this many times. We talk about it in regard to point of view. We can talk about it in terms of backstory. We can talk about it in terms of projecting the future. We can talk about it in terms of everything else other than this myopic concentration on the present. If you do it, it's a risk to benefit ratio. It's simple. You know, we all understand risk to benefit ratio. You know, when we come down to dealing with our finances or whatever, we get it, right? Get it with story too. You have the reader in the body of the main character that you want them to experience the story through. Is it worth it to draw them out and throw them into the bygone era?
Right.
Do you gain more by doing that? Is there a benefit to the risk that you're going to lose your reader forever because you did it? This is the question that we want to ask ourselves.
Okay.
One
That's
of our
very yeah.
Yeah. One of our issues with writing, it's really difficult for us. I'm getting into sort of the metaphysical problem of writing. The metaphysical problem of writing is that we're sitting at a desk and we're basically thinking. But what we're trying to depict is a person living. A person living their life through time is not able to suddenly take themselves out of time and go into the past. They might imagine they do. They might think about the past. Right. That's all fine, but they cannot go there. However, when you write, as you write this sentence, you do that to me. You make me leave this imaginative space of this town and you put me into the bygone era.
Okay.
And that makes me sometimes in writing we talk about the willing suspension of disbelief. The willing suspension of disbelief is that I'm not in my office reading a piece and with all the problems of the world around me, that I have to do the dishes, I have to do the laundry, I have to get my kids to school, I have to pick them up, I have to do this, I have to... The suspension of disbelief is that I'm not in this reality. I'm instead in this reality. You do not... That is a very, very precious thing that the reader is allowing you, but it's very delicate. So Neil, I'm really giving you the riot act on this for something very small. It's as easy as just going tick, tick, and just crossing it out. It really is. So it's not a big deal, but I wax poetic about it so that we can all really absorb it. Because the funny thing is, there's this great struggle that I engage in with all writers and myself. I'm telling you, I'm being honest, where I want to think. I think that my intellect is so amazing and is worthy. Every turn that it takes, every idea it has is just gold. I believe that. I truly do. And I have to wrestle with the reality that my reader wants to experience an imaginative life. They do not want to experience my erudition, my superior intellect. They have no interest. They don't even think I have a superior intellect.
Yeah.
You know, so be careful.
The reader needs to be transported into that world.
Yeah. But if you're going to do it, really do it. So if you're going to do it, come in as a narrator who says this. Come in as a narrator who takes a paragraph and tells us about the bygone era.
Right.
Own it. You have to own it. Don't slip it in. Own it. But then realize that there is a cost of that too, because now you're going to have a paragraph of the reader reading a narrator's metaphysical commentary about the environment rather than reading the physical action of the character.
Right.
So you want to think about that too. I do not want
So
to.
that's a trade-off. I can either insert some sort of dialogue there instead of, say, some sort of reminiscing about something. Instead of that, just keep it in the present by some sort of fast exchange of, as in dialogues, snappy, something snappy.
Exactly. This is what being a writer is about. Okay, so you have this big guy that Amar meets, right? And he says, "Walk with me, Delhi boy." I love that. I love he says Delhi boy. Awesome. I love the dialogue there. But perfect. This guy says he grabs him by the scruff of the neck and he says, "Have you ever been here before?" Right? And Amar goes, "No." And he's like, this was a glorious city in bygone era. I mean, if he talks that way, which I don't think anyone does, but if he does, then he does. Yes, this is what we do. We are
actually what I as in later on, I'm why are the people laughing there? Because the pot-bellied man who's taking him to Barrow's the character's house is himself Barrow Singh. So that is what I want to reveal at the end. As in when the lady of the house opens the door, she greets him and as in calls him by his name or whatever. So then Amar, who's actually just being led along, realizes that this is the person he's come to meet. And Amar actually means immortal in Sanskrit, and I'm going to kill him off later. So in a riot.
Okay.
Orchestrated by this man.
Okay, so, I hear that you're giving me a warning here, and you're saying stop criticizing my piece. I killed my no, but okay, I love that. That's a great idea. I love this character that says "Walk with me, Delhi boy," but then you don't use him. So use him instead. Like you say, have a dialogue, have the characters. Then Amar can be like, "No, I've never been here before," and he's like, "Well, this used to be a town. It was like this." You had this character. He's a major character. He's not a minor character. He can talk.
Right. Okay.
And then Amar can be like, and the big guy can say, "Why are you even here?" And he's like, "Well, I have to talk to this corrupt politician." And he's like, "Oh, is he corrupt? Okay, how is he corrupt?" And then he tells him, "Is it corrupt in this way, and this way, and this way?" And set it up. It's great. Yeah. It's a great setup. Why don't you? Can you just read? I was going to have you read to start with, so I'm just going to have you finish off by reading. Can you read this section from "Walk with me, Delhi boy" to the end?
Okay. Walk with me, Delhi boy. I'll take you to Barrow Singh's house. The pot-bellied man started walking fast, gesturing with his hand for Amar to follow. He was dressed in a white kurta pajama with a red turban adorning his big head. Amar had an opportunity to take in the sights and sounds of Raisinagarh again. The narrow streets were lined with small shops and houses made of mud and brick. A group of children played hopscotch in the middle of the road, and he saw a few cows again, oblivious to the honking cars and motorcycles. The air was thick with the smell of spices, diesel, and cow dung. Amar covered his nose with a handkerchief and kept following this strange pot-bellied man through the winding labyrinthine streets. They turned a corner, and Amar saw an ancient Shiva temple in the distance, which the man did not pay attention to. They finally arrived at a colossal house, a spacious bungalow with a well-tended garden and a fleet of modern cars parked outside. This must be the corrupt power broker Barrow Singh's house that Luthra has sent me to. Amar Thought.
Okay, very nice. I love the details. I really, I probably would not give you as hard a time about being immersed in this experience if it wasn't such a wonderful experience. So Neil, I'm going to tell you something. The truth is, I don't know. I may never make it to India. I may never go to this place. Please let me experience it fully. Within the context of your dynamic story, you're already developing it. I want to go into your world. Don't invite me in and then slap me in the face. Okay. I'm being very physical today. I don't know. Maybe it's because I had such a rigorous exercise yesterday. Thank you, Sunil.
Yeah, just last question. As in, you've said, which the man did not pay attention to, be more subtle.
Yes, be more subtle. That's it. I've said it.
Okay.
I mean, that's a little bit like, you're really letting me know that he did not see it. Okay, there it was, and he did not pay attention to it. Just have it pass by. It's enough. Your reader doesn't need to be hit over the head. Okay,
fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. I really enjoyed reading this, and I think you have I love that plot, and I love the plot device, because this character, I do find that are maybe our eviler characters, our corrupt characters, they end up also being very rich characters. And I think that you're starting off very well with this pot-bellied man who says, "Walk with me, Delhi boy." Okay, let's see. Arun, let's talk about your piece.
Hey, can you come to my piece after this? I mean, can you get somebody else? I'm just finishing up with the dishes, so if you can give me 10 minutes.
Okay, no problem. But Sri Charan, you'll come in as the tag team, the substitute in this wrestling match of narrative fiction. Okay. Let's see, Sri Charan, where is your thing? Ah, the murder. Okay.
Yeah, murder. Oh, yeah.
Sri Charan, this is fitting. This. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
This fits into your pattern. Do you know how it fits into your pattern?
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead. You tell me.
Weird settings, fantasy settings, such things.
Well, yes, weird settings, and the first couple of pages of a weird setting that intrigues me but doesn't continue. So Sri Charan, you actually have only one assignment. I know we usually have a restriction about the amount of material that's submitted, but you've arrived at this higher level. Okay, we're gonna now have levels. I'm not sure that this is a good idea, so we might step it back. But right now we're gonna have levels in which you've leveled up, and you are able to submit an entire story. Okay, and we will enjoy talking about it. Well, actually, we're gonna find that Arun did submit an entire story, so it's not without precedent. We want to see the entire work next time.
Entire work, I'm not sure, but maybe I'll send chapter wise or piece wise, like that.
Yeah, there you go. A chapter would be great. Anything that seems to have an arc all the way through. You are the master of intriguing beginnings.
Okay, thanks. But I think you have not read the end of any piece I submitted till now, probably.
Well, remember, our strengths are also our weaknesses, so don't forget that. Being the master of intriguing beginnings is not necessarily a good thing.
Yes.
It may mean, like, who was it? Sisyphus, who has the boulder? The beginning of the story. the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
Oh, so he keeps pushing the boulder onto the mountain. Is that?
Yeah, but we're supposed to have an emotional roller coaster, but Sisyphus is just stuck on that first hill.
Okay. Yes. Maybe I should unstuck myself.
Yeah, try and get over the top, and then let the ball roll down the other side.
Yep.
Why don't you read the first couple? These first two paragraphs.
Yeah, sure. Ahuno looked into the fat crow's eye. "Can you understand me?" he whispered, and waited. But mother only indulged itself into tearing the chicken leg. A funny name for a crow, but his father had never cared about names anyway. Ahuno observed it carefully, hoping that it would cast its eyes onto him, hoping that it would answer back like it did to his father. It did, but only to sneak its beak into the meat sack he was carrying. "Get off!" Ahuno pulled back the sack as the fat crow struggled and shook in its cage to snatch it from his hands. "I had others to feed." He glanced to his right and counted the cages on the wooden rack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 2 more rows of cages behind this. Ahuno sighed and moved to the next cage, fishing for a bone. This one was a newborn, only a month old, and had a bad temper. It had almost pecked him in his eye a few days ago while feeding. He had remembered his father's stories about how the crows could tear skin and ears of a reckless animal in the wilderness. That was very long ago, when his mother had been alive and his father had been kind and sober.
Let's have you read a little bit further.
Yeah. "Cow." It was a bad-tempered crow, popping its beak out between the iron bars of the cage. "Cow," it said in a low tone, disguising its angry screeches, which he remembered quite distinctly as ugly and demonic, with cute baby chirps. "You get only a bone for your nasty work the other day," Ahuno said, and tossed the bone in his hands. The crow caught it deftly. "Do you have a name yet?" Ahuno asked, but even this one paid him no attention once it got what it needed. "What about Catcher?" Ahuno whispered. "I knew father would not care about your name, but I need something to call you, don't I?" "Cow." It was the mother that called this time. "Cow, cow, cow." "What is it, mother?" Ahuno said. It was hard not to get irritated with such ugly bird song. He wished he had nightingales to feed instead. "Stop it." "Cow, cow, cow." The fat crow turned its beak to the left of the rookery, to the window facing the open meadows on the south.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for your time. So I'm just gonna put this as an example to sort of what I'm talking about. Like, I am very, very happily in this space. Sri Charan, what you do so well is you're going to have to fight yourself out of this. It's kind of like a wet paper bag that you're going to have to fight out of it in order to keep telling the story. But you draw us into this world and into this character's point of view, and the arena, we call the arena the place that we put the story within. It's very important, actually, because in a sense, it's the arena that I want to go into. I want to involve the reason I go into it is because I'm involved in the struggle of the character. And the struggle of the character is going to reveal something that I'm going to be able to take away as a reader to inform my life and to ensure my survival success, perhaps. But in the meantime, I just want to go into this other world. I want to leave my world behind, right? The things I have to do. Arun, I reminded him he had to do his dishes, and so he went and he did them. I don't want to be reminded that I have to do mine. I just want to go into this space. So, Shutran, you do that so wonderfully. I'm just happy here. But now I want the story to go on.
Yes.
I want it to progress. I want it to take the further steps.
Yes.
So I have a note. You know how I sometimes do notes? I'm going to do a little note. I actually designed this note for Vandana because her piece also inspired me to write this note. But it has to do with what we're trying to do in stories, and what, let's say, Sritran, you have this thing where you do actually have this thing where you start these stories, and we really need you to, get to the dramatic purpose of the story. Others of us, and then I'm saying Vandana a little bit, but certainly me in my past, it was a big transition for me to move away from a story in which nothing happens to a story in which there's an actual protagonist doing something against forces of antagonism. Mm. That is not completely the world. The world sometimes happens to us, but we need to make this transition into accepting our central character as a protagonist who is acting for a purpose, and things occur. So I'm going to, because I have it ready, I'm going to share it with you anyway, even though Vandana's not here, but I think it's applicable to you too, Sritran. So what we deal with is narrative. And actually, Arun, this is going to be for you as well, because when we talk about your piece, which I enjoyed very much, I wonder if these issues of dynamics are occurring where the protagonist is moving through a series of events in order to come out the other side changed, because that's the purpose of story. In the big picture, a story is not life. Okay, so life happens, we live life, and if we grow or we don't grow, who knows? Whether something happens of momentous importance in our life or doesn't, who knows? It's kind of it's a long drawn out affair. But stories are about something happening, something discrete and unified occurring. That means that a character comes in, has some kinds of experiences, and comes out changed. I sometimes make the joke, if a tree falls in a forest and the protagonist is not changed by it, it doesn't matter. That's a little bit complicated, but anyway, it means that the character must be changed by the event. That's what makes it a story. That's what makes it something momentous as opposed to something that's ordinary. I'm not trying to make judgments about people's lives and how we live them at all. I'm just talking about the sort of standard that we've developed. We don't tell everything as a story. We only tell certain things as stories, and that means something has occurred in them. So narrative simply means a sequence of events, but a story is a sequence of events that arrives at something, so in which something occurs. So I just write up here, cause and effect is the basis of storytelling. We tell stories about this happened and then this happened. This is how we learned about stories initially. We have not gone backwards with them. We see that the rain falls, and then we see that the plants grow, and we say, the rain has caused the plant, right? Cause and effect. Cause and effect we can represent in stories as being A, that's the character of the protagonist, plus B, that's the antagonist. These are the things that we need to draw together, equals C, which is the change of character. So A, the protagonist. When we think about the protagonist, my little screen will be the parameters of the story. The protagonist enters the story, right? They already have some issue. They have a problem. The story is about this character, the protagonist, changing at the end. The story is about the protagonist. The story is not about vilifying? I never know how to say that. Almost all the words I know, I've only read. I've never heard them. Anyway, vilifying or vilifying, the story is not about vilifying the antagonist. That's not what the story is about. It's not, The story is not about showing how the antagonist victimizes the protagonist. That's not what the story is about. The antagonistic force is there to challenge the protagonist. And we can even say that the antagonistic force is finally, in some ways, we might not like them as a teacher, but they're finally the teacher of the protagonist, because the protagonist changes because of the experiences that they have in the story. So the character comes in, they have a problem. And Sri Tran, I'm bringing this up to you, but Arun, I'm bringing it up to you as well. I'm bringing it up to all of us as storytellers. We should understand and know what the problem is with our character, because the problem that they enter in with is the problem that's going to be resolved at the end. That should be blowing our mind at this point. I think it's John Barth called this the unstable ground situation. And the unstable ground situation can, let's take, the unstable ground situation can have it can be a psychological issue, or a spiritual issue, or whatever we want to say with the character, but it's also often reflected in the environment itself. So if we think about Romeo and Juliet, for example, Romeo enters the scene, he's a person bereft of love and connection with another human being, right? The resolution is that he achieves that, but he achieves it only in death, okay? So not great, but he achieves it. So he comes in bereft of love and connection for another human being. He's also in an environment, right, in which the Montagues and I had to remember, in which the Montagues and Capulets are at war with each other, right? So do you see what I'm saying? He has a problem on a spiritual level that will be resolved at the end of the story, and his problem is part of the overall societal problem that he's living within. Because of this feud, he's also bereft of love. Does that make a little sense?
Hey, Andrew, can I ask you a question here?
Sure.
So I've been reading this book called The Screenwriter's Problem Solver. Okay, it's by somebody called Sid Field. I don't know if you've heard about it. But so in that, he talks about how in screenwriting, you've got the setup, which is what kind of the character enters the scene. Then you have the middle confrontation period. And then at the end of it, you have the resolution. And between each of these, there's a plot point 1 and plot point 2 between the confrontation and the resolution, etc. I just wanted to, as I was reading it, I was trying to figure out if that was very similar to story writing as well, or are these two completely different ways of writing a story? I don't know if I'm taking you away from what you want to discuss at this point. We can probably park it for later, but this was a question on my mind, so I thought I'll ask you.
Okay, so I have a simple answer. All stories are the same.
Okay.
Every single story works the same way. So people use different language to talk. Basically, this has been my experience. I've read and dabbled in various things, but I've also had many teachers, and I listen very carefully. I'm really big into listening, and I never confront what comes at me. I always say, oh, okay, let's take that in. Let's think about it. And probably what you read is exact. It's just going to be somewhat different language. You're going to see that there's going to be a correlation with what I'm going to present to you, which again, everything that I will tell you is because it's been part of my experience. It's not because I've read a bunch of rules. You want to be careful about, I think, be careful about reading rules and trying to apply them. That means that you can become a hack. Being a hack might be okay, but that's not really what I would want to try and teach someone. I want them to I think that there's a lot to be gained from understanding and using the structures of story that, yes, on the one hand, maybe we produce a good story, that's great. But where the real advantage is for us personally. with us using these forms to imaginatively challenge our characters and have them grow. That as a lesson is very valuable for us as writers, as human beings. And I think it's that lesson of growth that we give our reader. And that is important. That's the service that we're giving. And that's actually why I'm bringing up this, as opposed to these, Sri Charan, who I'm sort of pointing at as being like, he begins, but he doesn't get his character involved in this other process. I want Sri Charan to have this other process. Vandana also, she's writing the same story about, forces of antagonism, basically always just, sort of winning, right? And that's not what we're writing about. We're writing about the protagonist struggling against these forces and then, and actually being somewhat defeated by them, discovering themselves and actually changing, right? So it's not about simply, well, let's leave it at that. And Arun, I'll be interested to hear how you think what I'm going to say here corresponds. Okay, so I write the unstable ground situation. The problem is a result of the backstory. So this is a little bit complicated when we think about it actually psychologically. Story writers sometimes, and I think that psychoanalysis and some of those talk therapies sort of make it seem as if, there's a backstory element that's discrete. An exact thing happened that created the character's problem. I'm not sure that that's true. It could be a lifetime. It could be, relationships. It could be, incremental. But it finally doesn't matter. What matters is that the character arrives with this unstable situation. Romeo arrives without love, right? He arrives loveless. That is the problem. We do not need to have the backstory explained to us. The story is not about the backstory. The story is about the protagonist's struggle against the forces of antagonism that drives the protagonist to a point in which they actually have to make a choice about whether they change or they don't change.
But isn't the backstory important in terms of showing why the protagonist takes a particular set of actions when presented with that choice?
So I'm just going to, Arun, I will just repeat. The story is not about the backstory. The story is about the protagonist's struggle against the forces of antagonism, right? Because, and I can maybe explain why the backstory is a thing that's specific to the character. We can know it and it can be done well, but it is not the principal thing that the reader is interested in, because the universal thing that every reader is interested in, right, is struggle against forces of antagonism. This is a thing that all of us across the entire planet understand. And so I can empathize with the struggle of, did we have Amar early on who went to the town and then met the big, the pot-bellied man? I can empathize with his struggle. He has a task to do and he has problems to do it. I can immediately adopt that situation. I can feel it. So the struggle of the story is the thing that connects the reader to the work and to the story. The backstory is specific. Okay, so like if I tell my story, I can say, these are my specific problems. And while the reader is reading that, they're like, well, those are his problems, but are they my problems? That creates a distance between the reader and the protagonist. It's okay. It's fine to do it. Think about it. Do it with discretion. I had a teacher, written many novels, a wonderful person. And I said, when should I write backstory? And he said, only when you absolutely have to. So either the backstory actually advances the front story or it's immaterial. I'm just making that argument, and you can take it in for however you want. But explaining why a character does something, why this individual is the way they are, that is separating them from the reader. Whereas the action of the story draws us together. Every human being on Earth, every animal on Earth knows what struggle is. So, and it is hard, Arun, and all of us. We all have trouble. We all have trouble managing our desire to explain. But I said earlier to Sunil, you know, it's like, that's our intellect. We all want to demonstrate how we're putting everything together, the cause and the effect, and show off basically our erudition and our intelligence. That is not what the human being is concerned with. Intellectualization is somewhat immaterial. The life of the human being in a state of struggle with its environment, that is so much more visceral. So the story is not about the backstory, it's about the process, the life struggle that solves the problem. And I have this note, the struggle is against the character's will, because I consider this a truism in life, but I've heard it from someone else, and I consider it a truism in storytelling. The one thing that's absolutely consistent, again, universally about all people, maybe, according to me, they don't want to change. Okay, so the character walks in with their problem, they do not want to change. They want to continue being the same, but they get confronted by the force of antagonism, and finally through that struggle, they are forced to change. And having a story in which a character enters and they are not forced to change, nothing happens basically, nothing is forced to happen, which is that change of character, that it has a name, and it's called imitative fallacy. Imitative fallacy means that you've written a story that imitates life. In life, a character does not want to change, and then they don't. In a story, a character does not want to change, and then they do. That's what makes it a story as opposed to life. That's the difference between the two. I've always loved that. I've loved that sort of depiction of like life. Life is, a character doesn't want to change, and they don't. You know, it's like,
that's actually a great insight. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. It was when I learned that, you know, from my teachers and mentors and through my experience, it's not just, of course, Arun, it's not hearing it, it's understanding that that's true. I'll say true-ish, okay? It's true-ish anyway, that this is a thing. So when we get to the story, we have character. I have character A is the protagonist meets force B, which is the force of antagonism. I will repeat, the force of antagonism needn't be one person over and over again. Boom, 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 boom. The force of antagonism is the entire world. The protagonist is this sort of protected self that they want to continue to protect. And everything in the world is challenging that. And every scene that we write should be challenging the character. We don't write scenes that don't, because that's not economical. The meets the force B, the antagonist, which is i.e. the rest of the world. And so our cause and effect is this: A, the protagonist, plus B, the force of antagonism, equals, and I write C, but I go A1. That's character change. So the character has moved from A. I know it sounds ridiculous to say it like this, but I really want to emphasize it. They move from, in the beginning of the story, they come out A. At the end of scene 1, they are A1. They are not A anymore. I'm just going to say, please God, everyone, understand that. I have to understand it too. I have to progress my character. That is the story progression. If they are not A1, if they're still just A after the first scene, I haven't done anything. Nothing has happened. So now I've used 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, it doesn't matter. I've used this space and I've not done anything. I'm not being a storyteller. I'm engaged in imitative fallacy. These are hard truths, I think, for us to deal with. So this is A, protagonist plus B, that's the cause that achieves the effect, which is the protagonist advancing to another stage, A1. A story in 3 escalating scenes looks like this. And this took me a little time to do this morning, I have to admit. I had a couple false starts. A plus B, because I've never used these symbols before. This is my first time with these symbols to express this idea. A plus B equals A1. The next scene, A1 plus B1, because the force of antagonism hasn't magically disappeared. It reasserts itself in a new and escalated form, equals A2. The next scene, A2 plus B2 equals A3. A3, we imagine, is the solution. If we're writing in 3 scenes, we've arrived at the resolution. And I say the resolution to the unstable ground situation that was offered in the beginning. Back to Romeo and Juliet. Ridiculously, I mean, when was that written? 1600s? Still potent today. Retold today over and over again. Why? Because it has this form of story. Romeo and Juliet come into a loveless world. They live in a loveless world and they have no love. At the end, they do have love and union, but it's not possible. It reflects upon the world. It is not possible in the loveless world. It's only possible in death. It's a perfectly arced story. We, this is where it gets tough. We, because we're storytellers, right? We have to do something as good as Shakespeare, because if we don't do it as good as Shakespeare, then people are just going to read Shakespeare. Okay, granted, a lot of people are not going to read Shakespeare because it's too difficult, but they are going to retell the story with Leonardo DiCaprio, et cetera, who knows what they're going to do. But we're in competition with the greatest storytellers who take on this challenge of having characters engage in an experience and come out the other side against their will, having been transformed. That experience transforms the reader. So I throw it to you because I think that this is, I know for me, when I began to understand this, you know, it was an incremental process. I came to writing and I wanted to write the story of basically my victimization by the world, you know, and transitioning to the point where I had to start to write protagonists who were acting for something and being challenged, and creating that dynamic relationship was a way for me to reimagine what actually happens in life and to see life differently. this is a place that we have to try and push ourselves. Sri Charan, you're at this place. Arun, you're writing a wonderful story, and I enjoyed being immersed in the experience. But my comment about it will be, is this happening in it?
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you can understand, and I'm saying I look forward. We'll have you read a little bit of it. But this is really my big comment on it. It's written wonderfully. Cut out your adverbs. But it's written.
No, I do that in draft. My first editing.
Yeah, but if you can understand, like, you're writing a wonderful story, and we can write a wonderful story like that. But if you can understand applying these ideas of dynamics to our story to make something actually happen in it, you can see the level that raises us to. And I will tell you the truth. I've written a number of stories, and actually achieving this effect remains a struggle. And those pieces that I've written have been generally accepted as successful. So I'm continuing to grapple with this issue. I'm continuing to grapple even with the issue of we drive our character through a set of circumstances to a point where they make a choice. Do they? Do they actually have a choice? I am fascinated with that problem. Do we have the opportunity for free will given the right circumstance? I am fascinated with that idea. Have I written a story in which there's been really a change of character, or this, life transforming, event in which the world is not seen the same way again? I don't know if I've achieved that, but I'm going to continue to strive for it. Anyway, Sri Charan, that's the riot act for you. I really want you to
one question. One question I have in this comment, like, what do you wrote temporary stability, right?
I wrote what?
At the end, you wrote temporary stability, right? At the end, the resolution to unstable.
Right.
What is it exactly? Like, I did not completely understood what the temporary is.
Right. What I mean is, so the story begins with the problem of character. It ends with what also Aristotle calls catharsis, right? So it ends with this feeling of resolution, at the end. At the end, right, Romeo and Juliet are bound in love and death, right? They have love and death. We have a feeling of catharsis, but I'm saying it's temporary because the reality is life goes on, right? Okay. So it's we are, again, in stories, we are creating an illusion of problem and resolution, a temporary writers will talk a lot about creating catharsis for the reader. And yes, the reader does feel catharsis. We want to try to achieve catharsis for the reader because, again, that's our gift to the reader. That's what we're doing for humanity, is trying to provide these stories that provide some catharsis, which is, kind of soothing us because of the difficulties of life, right? But it is temporary, right? We'll close the book. I mean, I still remember when I finished 100 Years of Solitude. Oh my goodness. I closed that book. I still remember the table I had. I had this big Lazy Susan table with red Formica on it. And I put it in the middle of the table and I just looked at the book for a while. And then I stopped and I did the dishes, right? And then I had to get on with the struggle of life. But for a while, I stopped and I stared at that book. I mean, both with that feeling of catharsis and also a feeling of awe at what can be accomplished within a book.
Okay.
Abhinav, I'll send these notes to you if anyone wants to reference them again or see them.
Good.
Yeah.
That'll be useful. Yes, I definitely think there's a lot of value in this.
I understood.
And Arun, so one of the talking about your work now, one of the things I notice is that there really isn't a dynamic issue in this beginning. It's not active, right? The king is simply sort of gazing around, and the difficulty is not really one of the king. I mean, it's maybe it's a metaphysical issue, since he's witnessing this warfare, engaged in front of his fortress, but it's basically static, right? So that's a little bit of a problem, right? So if you are reading the movie scripts, but if you thought about it like as a movie, the time that's being taken up with this scene of the king doing this and that, if we shot that as a movie, which is in a way how I'm experiencing it as unfolding in front of my eyes, it would be the king for quite a number of minutes simply gazing around, right? And we would think that with a movie that would take too long. There would be, in movies they talk about beats, right? There would be too many beats, of that gazing around and showing basically different scenes and showing the relationships. But still, you write very well. And
Otis, can I ask you a question here?
Absolutely.
So let me so this scene, the chapter actually is kind of one of towards the end of the book, the third part of my trilogy. And the battle is already in progress. So the previous chapter would have a number of scenes of the actual battle and the formations and how they clash and all of that happening. And so it cuts to this chapter where I describe all that, and then the king is kind of looking out over it. Does that make a little more sense, or you still feel that this is still very static in the beginning?
Well, it really has to do with it. It'll end up having to do with the pace of your work. So the way I think of it is I think about active scenes, dynamic active scenes. So basically the protagonist versus antagonistic forces, rendering those in scenes. And I think of those as being tension. Okay, so to me, there's two emotions that we engage in with our reader: tension and release from tension. So those are relative. And if you watch movies, you'll notice it. In movies, they do it all the time. There's scenes where it's very active, and if you're perceptive, you feel the tension, or you can notice the tension in yourself. And then there's a break where you get to experience less tension, basically. Without doing that, if we just kept it tense all the time, that would still be a flat line. It might be a very shrill flat line, or it could be this flat line, but it's still a flat line, and that's not what we want. We move between tension and release from tension, tension, release from tension, etc. So this section would be a release from tension because there's no tension in it. Just starting in, I wonder, I read with ease. So if there was something that was active and tense, and this was the relief from it, I would feel like I was still on my roller coaster, right? Because that's what we want. We want to always feel like we're moving forward. So that's why I say that, make that comment about the pacing. I don't know what you've had before, but you'd want to think about the pacing in order to sustain this length of lack of tension, basically. Again,
okay.
We want to see the tension and the release of tension as being sort of in balance with each other. You're able to release the tension to the same degree that you were able to build the tension. If you haven't really built the tension, you can't release the tension for 10 pages, right? So they have to be balanced. That is also going back to Sunil or anyone else. That's also the same pattern that we use if we want to interject backstory, if we want to interject a narrator. It's the same thing. We will have tension, basically the momentum moving forward, this problem, and then we break that tension with, for example, the narrator coming in, or in this case, your king gazing around, or revealing an element of backstory. But that release and whatever's happening there should also be advancing the next point. So we actually have, if we talk about a roller coaster like this, it's actually going up and down, but it's always going up, right? To a climactic point. We can also see that as, if we want to think about, I like chiasmus because also spiritually we're going down. For the individual and the character, they're going down to a place where they have to confront themselves. So we're rising in tension, but the character is also descending to a point where they are at basically the ultimate point of struggle, where they actually have to change. So that's a chiasmus model that goes like that.
Makes sense.
Otis, I have a small question related to our previous discussion. Like, sure. If we consider some adventure stories or superhero stories, like we usually face an antagonist, but at the end of the resolution of the fight with the antagonist, we don't see any change in the protagonist, right? Like if we see any adventures, for example, a Batman story or Spider-Man story, they release those stories in episodes wise. So in each episode they introduce a villain, and Spider-Man gets successful fighting that villain, but at the end we don't see any change, right?
Yeah, I mean that's.
I think that works best for the children's stories rather than adults kind of thing.
Well, so you're going to get me to talk about some big picture things, you know, but sometimes I talk about propaganda versus what I consider stories. And so that's one way to think about it. But the way, to me, my big picture elements are, so that character, the Spider-Man, the Batman that comes in, they come in A, they go through all of this, and they leave also as A, unchanged, basically. One, that is not what I'm looking for in a story, because I want to gain something out of it. That is kind of a waste of time. It's entertainment. It's fantasy fulfillment. But it's also, to me, it's static. The issue with it is that it's stasis. The character is static in the beginning, and they end up being static. And I think if I was going to be ideological, that's the great thing that I feel like I wish to combat with storytelling, is basically to talk about, to illustrate that life is not static. There are not these characters who go through life and experience and come out unfazed by it and even unchanged by it. That the human being is not a fortress. But yeah, I mean, there are many stories in which the character comes out unchanged, and to me, I feel that fails as a story, basically. So that's a kind of judgment that I have over it.
Yeah, like I understood what you're saying. If when we age up, like when we grow up, I don't enjoy those stories anymore. But I used to enjoy them when I was a child, mostly.
Right, because they're like this. I mean, we can think about it this way with propaganda, but it's like it's a fantasy empowerment, kind of, and that's sort of what the hero story is, right? The hero story is a fantasy empowerment. The stories that I'm talking about with characters changing are not hero stories. They are, because they're not about some individual who somehow ends up being better than other people. Batman is better than the people down here. Achilles is better than the people down here, because they're a hero. There are heroes, and then there are commoners. I don't tell those stories. I tell a story about a protagonist who's exactly like everybody else, regardless of where their station is. Okay. And they have experiences just like everyone else universally, and they come out transformed by them, and then by verisimilitude, I give that transformation to the reader, who is also able to experience what that character experienced. So it's not a, I mean, maybe that's a way to think of it. You know, those superhero stories are kind of advancing this sense of human hierarchy that I have a personal vendetta to dismantle.
Okay.
Otis, what about the anti-hero? Sorry to interject. Say, if there are like superhero movies, if you consider Heath Ledger as the Joker, so it comes out changed.
I don't know. I might have to think about it a little bit, but you know, it could be. Who asked me that question? I'm not sure who was speaking.
Sunil.
Oh, Sunil. Okay, thanks. It could be like, in the movies, I mean, we're getting into different topics. I mean, we're sort of like, now we're just bantering around, but like, it could be that, let's say you have Batman who remains unchanged. Well, the movies see that there's a need to provide some kind of human transformation in the story because that lifts the story. So instead, you sort of fix the audience. The audience as human beings experience life in a real way. They don't experience it as this sort of, this heroic character who cannot be affected by any of the events that they experience after their origin story, right? So they can more easily identify with the Joker, right? So they're actually having a point of identification with the Joker, perhaps, and they get to experience this sense of change in the story through that, as you're characterizing them, the anti-hero. I'm not exactly sure what anti-hero means, but I'm going with what you've suggested. So Neil, does that maybe it's something like that? I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't remember a few years back who's this guy who won the Oscar. The entire movie was on the Joker, Jared or something, Jude Law.
Wasn't
Joaquin Phoenix.
It wasn't Jude Law. It was.
It's Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, right. So right, and in that case, when they have the movie of the Joker, that is actually more of a true character who's, yes, they are the protagonist. I mean, the hero has some baggage with it, so I try to stay away from that a little bit. But it's usually, when I think of a hero in the modern sense, it means that they're a static character. And yes, like Shri Tran said, Batman starts as A and he ends as A. The things that he experiences don't change him whatsoever. He remains, he transforms maybe into the Dark Knight, but that's about it, right? He becomes worse. But the Joker in that story was a true protagonist. He had experiences, and from those experiences, he was changed. So I would call him a protagonist of the story. Yes, he's considered evil, but he's still the protagonist. It doesn't matter where our protagonist sort of falls in terms of a binary of good and evil. They simply need to be confronted by antagonistic forces and then changed at the end, and that makes them the protagonist. And because there was that experience, that kind of story arc of character, that's probably why that actor got an Oscar, because particularly with male characters in Hollywood, they are almost always depicted as being sort of unchangeable, and that's, to my mind, that's ridiculous. I mean, to imagine that, that there are these male characters who kill with ease, and the sort of the heartless 007 character, James Bond or Batman or anyone, who people going through first-person shooters, killing all the non-playable characters in the movie. It's I think that's detrimental to our culture, such as it is, such as it is. Okay, I think we better go though. That's a lot to think about, and I think for all of us thinking about writing, and I definitely have done this myself, is that, you know, we write where we are, you know, and it's like, and that is good. And I think we should finish those projects and we should publish them. And I think it's great to always also push ourselves to do something with our work. The best thing that I find about writing, I mean, the publishing is not the most important thing. To me, the most important thing is to use the story form. For me, I want to bring myself to a new territory. I truly, it might sound weird, but like writing is my antagonist, right? This desire to publish my work and to reach readers and to deal with this nameless, faceless audience that doesn't tolerate my intellectual vanity, right? This is my problem. And I want to use this story form to advance the way I feel, think, and experience the world. That's what's important to me about it, most important. So I hope we can keep that on our docket.
What is one, just a quick this thing. I know for some reason the PDF got cut off at the end, and you had written, is it the end or something? I sent you the remaining portion in another PDF. So
yeah, so, I saw that, but I didn't have time. I didn't have time to look at it. Another thing a little key room with your piece to look at. Whenever I experience shifting points of view, I always ask this question: whose story is it? So it's like, it's a very simple, it's a knee-jerk thing. It's my boilerplate, and I hate it myself too. It's like, to me, the protagonist, so the protagonist is also the person who's changed by the events. When we shift points of view, then I lose track of who is going to be affected by what is happening in the story.
What if more than one person is being affected?
Right. Right, and there's no perfect answer for it. You know, there's not a perfect answer for it, but you want to make sure that you are designing your story so that effective change does occur with each of them. Yeah.
So let me just tell you this much. So I think of you as my guru, right? Because you're my teacher. I've been learning. I did notice that the different points of view myself, and I knew that you would hit me on those. So that at least shows that I'm now aware of something called a point of view. Okay.
Exactly.
So you haven't failed as a guru.
Thank you for telling me that.
But so here is something. When I in a way, when I thought back to it and say, would I want to rewrite that piece in a more consistent point of view, I think what I was trying to get at was this the chaos that exists in a battle. So you kind of, it's like a camera that pans here, pans there, shows you different things. And that's the effect that I was going for, I think. I don't know if that confused you. If that confused you, I'll do a rethink, because I want my reader not to be confused, obviously. So,
well, you're saying a couple of things that I think are important. But the first is you're grappling with the issue. There's no answer to any of these problems that I'm presenting you all with, other than you as a writer grappling with them. There's no other answer. Grapple with them, that's it. There's not some static truth to be laid down on any story. Let's please hope God not. Because, I mean, I'm a little bit worried with AI telling stories. We'll see. We'll deal with that problem when it comes. But grapple with them, great. I've said before, as you probably remember, the only two things we don't want: confusion on one side, boredom on the other. I feel that confusion and boredom loop around to this place of complete boredom and complete confusion, which I imagine is what death is. Okay, so we do not want that. We want to be here in the sweet spot of necessary complexity, engagement, and clarity. Grapple with it. Just grapple with it.
Sure. Thank you.
It's encouraging. Obviously, you are grappling with it and you're thinking about it. And so this is the big problem of the writer, is that we have to come in as a person who can think about our work like that, but we also have to be a person who invents the work. And they're very different. So, and getting those two to kind of work together a little bit is very helpful for us. But just remember, we can't be overthinking our invention. We have to let our hands go. And if we do, I think we get close to the mark. If we get our intellect out of there, we focus, we make it physical, we make it sensory, we place the reader, we do that one great thing that the reader really, really wants, which is to leave their life behind and go into this other world. They tell you that by opening the book. It is a very precious thing that the reader gives us when they come to us and they open the book, and we have to have very tender hands and to hold them, right, once they've made that choice. So.
Okay, thank you. And if you can, whenever you have some time, look through the rest of that chapter and just let me know.
I will. I found your work very readable, and I really enjoyed it. And Sri Charan, I always enjoy your newest novel, Beginning. I do. So you have me hooked. Arun, you have me hooked. But for me, you're going to have the payoff. You do not want me to read through the story happily and then get to the end and not have that transformative experience. That's the goal, right? Arun, Sri Charan, you as well, right? You have to, you're starting these, you're drawing me into the story. Now you can't let me down. This is the way I look at it. I mean, once we have that reader, we have to hold on to them. We cannot let them go. But then at the end, there really has to be that payoff, or else they feel like their time was not honored.
Yes. Yes, I am aware of this actually. I am really trying to get onto that level of what you all said. I'm really taking that feedback actually.
Yeah, well, and it's hard too, because we're writers, and finally, like, we have to manage ourselves, because if we feel too much pressure, we don't want to do it, so we have to keep it joyful. We have to write towards joy, right? We have to, create a habit. And sometimes when Sri Charana might be like, sometimes when someone like me is putting pressure on you, you have to figure out how to put that out of your mind, right? And just carry on anyway. For me, the thing that does that is habit. Writing every single day, habit. I shut out the rest of the world, and then just keep going.
Yes.
We better go. But
I have been making it a habit to write from last week only. Not before that, I did not do that every day. But from last 2 or 1 week, like I have been doing this, writing every day something.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Otis. Thank you all. We will put this recording up on YouTube, and I will send the link out, and we will probably meet again next Sunday.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. The future, by definition, is unknown.
It sure is. And on that happy note, thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a good
Thank you.
rest of
Appreciate
your
it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.